Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you that you are as real and as close to us as you were to your disciples when you walked this earth. In fact, I think I could make the scriptural argument that you're even closer to us than you were to your disciples when you were on the earth. But either way, we've not been shortchanged. You are with us, and we thank you. We love you. Bless our time in the Word, I pray. Open our eyes, encourage us, strengthen us for your glory. In Christ's name, amen. Let's have a little fun before I get into the message. I'm going to show you some pictures from 14 years ago. All righty, so give me that first one if you would, please. That is our first ever camp meeting right there, and those are the people who gave us the week that we enjoyed this week. That's the Clark family. Brother Charlie behind the pulpit doing the talking, as always. And by the way, Brother Charlie's my friend. He's been my friend since 1987. I met him in Bible college, and we are tight, and so I can say whatever I want about him. But anyway, but there's the Clark family right there. Give me the next picture. There's another picture of them singing right here. By the way, the decor in the auditorium here, we were trying to replicate a tabernacle because this was our first camp meeting. You can't see it. Well, you can see a little bit. There, we had sawdust on the floor in here. And so give me the next one here. There's Brother Charlie. Yeah, he looks like a little kid there. And then to his left that's Vanessa, is it not? His daughter Vanessa, who is a huge part of the music now. Give me the next slide, if you would, please. All right, that is Brother Mike Clark, and there is the famous Travis Clark right there, singing right over here 14 years ago, and unbelievable. Give me one more shot of the Clark family, and I'm sorry about the red eye there, but anyway, just wonderful. Wonderful time. And now let me show you one more. This is one of my favorite memories in the history of our church. So the other pictures were Monday night right here. This is 2008. And Tuesday, Dr. Williams was here that week. Later in the week, Brother Jenkins would come. And maybe I've got that backwards. Actually, I think Brother Jenkins was here Monday or Tuesday. This was probably on a Thursday. Anyway, so, but Brother Williams was here all week. And so they sang Wednesday night, and then they were going to sing Thursday night again. And I said Thursday, I said to Brother Mike, I said, we're going to take you guys on a picnic. And later on, he was like, picnic? What, are you kidding me? And we took them to Garrison, New York. This is directly across. This is Garrison Landing. It's across the Hudson River from West Point, one of my favorite spots on the earth. And so we went out there. We had, a nice picnic lunch and so forth. And then if you see kneeling down in the back, Pastor Clark with the white shirt on, he had the idea to just have all of us sit down there and have Dr. Williams, who is standing under the willow tree, speak to us for a few minutes. And he spoke to us on friendship. And there we are. That's our family and the Clark family. You see Brother Joey in the front row as he confessed this morning his besetting sin is not paying attention, and he's doing it right there. And that's him facing backwards, and I think that's Travis next to him right there that he's messing around with while Brother Williams is talking. But anyway, here's the thought before we go back to the main slide. That family right there, okay, at that point there hadn't been a first summit yet. Their first summit was a year and 2 months after that. They weren't, I don't think they were quite finished with their building. They were still in their old building, which is not much bigger than ours, to be honest, the old building. And also, at that point right there, their parents, Brother Charlie, Brother Mike, and their sister Vicky, all of whom were in that picture, they had made 1 or 2 CDs. They might have made the CD that has all because of the love of Christ on it. I don't remember, or Stand for Jesus. But they were just starting out. And here they are 14 years later, and they literally have not only impacted the Northeast powerfully, all of America, but the entire world. How do you do that? How do you do it? Hey, they're flesh and blood just like you and me. They're human. They're not perfect. They're not flawless. I mean, they're pretty awesome people, but none of us is without flaws. How do you do it, and how do you keep that fire going? Well, I'll tell you, a huge part of it is Pastor Clark. A couple of years ago, I've heard Brother Charlie say this a few times, but one time in particular, I remember him saying in a pastor's session, he said, the most important ingredient in the success of our church is the Spirit of my Father. Now, maybe that doesn't impact you as hard as it does me, because I'm the pastor and you're not, but that's a huge thing. And you say, well, Pastor, that sounds like that's your job then. It is my job, but I do need your help. I do need your help at keeping my spirit right. When occasionally there's somebody who is, hey, okay, so we need to solve problems. Problems come up. We need to not ignore them. We need to solve them. But we don't have to do it with a griping, complaining spirit. And sometimes you can help somebody with a griping, complaining spirit just by reminding them, hey, the strength of our church is more important than the fact that you got your car scraped in the parking lot. That's not unimportant. We need to deal with it. But we don't need to kill the spirit of our church over it. And so that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I need your help. But anyway, go to that beginning slide, and let me give you some thoughts. First, from Psalm 63, and we're going to just roll through them. I'll stop once in a while, but for the most part, let's just see what David said. When David said, man, all I have are the memories of those great gatherings in the sanctuary, where I felt like I was in the presence of God, but now I'm out in the wilderness. So now what do I do? First thing he said, first thing in Psalm 63, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is, to see thy power and thy glory, so as I have seen thee in the sanctuary. Let me stop and say that though I am not the expert on maintaining the overwhelming power of God in our church, I'm always striving, but now I've got the help of a lot more people because you've seen some things that you've never seen before, but I'm not the expert on it. But I'll tell you what I do have experience with. I said in my prayer over 100 times I've been in the position that I'm in right now, and you may think, well, that's crazy. The math is real easy. Okay, from the time I became pastor in 1994, I went to pastor school every single year until from 1995 until 2012 when they had the last pastor school. Well, how many is that right there? 12 plus 5. So there's 17 times right there. I also led over at least 20 trips to youth conference at First Baptist Church. We're up to 37 now. I've also worked with my wife to lead at least, way more than this, but at least a dozen trips for the ladies to go to the Christian Womanhood Spectacular. And so now we're right up around 50. Add to that the men's conferences at Heritage Baptist Church. Add to that the youth the powerhouses at Heritage Baptist Church over the years. We're up around over 75 now. By the way, add to that the very first time I remember coming home from a service. All right, So in 1981, I went to a week of preaching, and on June the 10th, 1981, my life was actually June the 8th, 1981. I got the assurance of my salvation, and I call it my salvation date. I may have gotten saved when I was 7, but I know that I got saved, if not earlier, on June the 8th, 1981. Almost the exact same story as Aaron's and Lucas's. And so I came home from that. Wednesday night of that week, and you don't want me to be bored with the stories, but I'm telling you, those are 3 massive weeks where I came home saying, how do I sustain this? How do I carry this forward in my life? And many other meetings over the years. We started going to camp meeting in Gaylord, Michigan in 2008. And then our family went every year until they had their last one just a couple of years ago. There's another 10 meetings where I came home just ready to tear it up for the Lord. How do I sustain this? Not counting all the meetings that we've had here over the years, including that camp meeting, the picture that we looked at. We used to have something called the Fresh Oil Conference. Here's another strange intersection, by the way, in the history of our church. So the leading preacher of the Fresh Oil Conferences that we had, our first one in 2002 and our last one in 2007, the leading preacher was Dean Miller Sr., and the closing preacher of this past week was Dean Miller Jr., his son. And so there's another huge intersection in our history. So I'm saying, when I say well over 100, I'm just laying that out so you know I'm not exaggerating. I've been in this position before where I personally have said, how do I take what I'm feeling right now and sustain it? How do I maximize it? How do I put it to work in my life? Okay? Number 1, maintain your appetite for God. Maintain your appetite for God. We all have good appetites and we have bad appetites. All right? I have an appetite for buttered rolls that will never die. It doesn't fade away. But it will kill me. So, because bread is one of the worst things for somebody with diabetes. So, honestly, I haven't had a straight up from the deli buttered roll in maybe a year. Maybe less than that. But it used to be, honestly, a daily thing. Now it's almost never. It's a rare treat. Why? Because I don't want to maintain that appetite. But I tell you, an appetite I do have to maintain is an appetite for proteins, because proteins are what's good for me. And so, whereas used to I would go to any old place and get any old thing that I can afford for if I'm out and I need to eat, now I go somewhere where I can get some proteins. My favorite thing on the planet is not a chef's salad, but I have built and maintained an appetite so that if you say, hey, let's go to Elmer's and get a chef's salad, I'll be like, yeah, I'm in. Why? Because I've cultivated that appetite and I maintain it because it's good for me. You have to cultivate your appetite for God. You have appetites for other things. Say, man, I would just, love to go home and plop down on the couch and binge on some whatever series, And by the way, it may not be some wicked, sinful thing. I was telling folks yesterday. I said, I've got an app on my computer. It's on my phone. It's on my iPad. Right now, if I wanted to, I could pull up Andy Griffith, and I could stay in Mayberry 24/7. And that may sound like the most boring thing in the world to you, but that's where I like to hang out. I like to hang out with Andy and Barney. But you know what? And they go to church. They go to church. I don't know what happened there. They go to church. They go to church on any group. There's a Bible sitting on the table in their living room. But that doesn't mean it helps me spiritually. Now, it's not sinful. I'm not saying it's wicked to watch. I'm saying I got to be careful what appetites I cultivate. And I've got to cultivate my God appetite more than anything else. It's got to overwhelm everything. Maintain your appetite. Then look at verses 3 and 4. Because thy loving kindness is better than life, my lips shall praise thee. Thus will I bless thee while I live. I will lift up my hands in thy name. how to keep the overwhelming presence of God maximized in your life. Worship God when you're alone. Worship God when you're alone. It's one thing to go into a magnificent setting like we've been in this week and get caught up, and it's a wonderful thing. And Gab, you're right. It's a taste of heaven. And by the way, it's a taste of heaven that we can have in our services if we will do the work, if we will make the effort. But it's a taste of heaven. But you can have that taste of heaven alone with God. Amen. You can. Worship God when you're alone. Then remember what you experienced. Verses 5 and 6. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness. My mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips when I remember upon my bed and meditate on thee in the night watches. We have a great tool. I told you about that week when I was 14 years old, and the message that I heard on Wednesday night called The Prodigal Son's Brother. And I didn't have it on YouTube. I went back to our Christian school, and they gave us order forms where we could order cassette tapes of the sermons. And I ordered the sermon from that Wednesday night, and I got it, and I just about memorized it, which is good because I took it to Bible college with me, and it got stolen, bless my classmates. But I could to this day quote parts of that message to you from hearing it over and over and over again when I was 14 years old. But we have an even greater tool, opportunity. We have YouTube. And the entire week is on YouTube. It may also be on Facebook. It may be on other places, but I know it's on YouTube. And I've been reliving it throughout the day just so I remember what I experienced. Now you say, well, Pastor, be careful. Do you really want to worship Solid Rock Baptist Church? I'm not worshiping Solid Rock Baptist Church. I'm remembering what I experienced. And can I show you something? If you've been to the summit before, you know it's true, and you know it was true this week. You will never hear Pastor Clark speak without him referencing the first time he walked into the church in Texas where Lester Roloff was pastor. I've heard him tell that story dozens of times. And he said he walked in and he thought he was going to die because the presence of God was so heavy in that room. And he revisits that experience again and again and again. Why? Because it keeps him going after. That's what I want. And that's why they have the all-night prayer meetings. And that's why they sing and sing and sing and sing. There were services where we sang an hour before we did anything else. What drives him to do that? He remembers what it was like to walk into a place where the presence of God was so heavy in that room. And that drives him to say, that's what I want. Remember what you experienced. Even the message he preached Monday night. If those of you that went are maybe not connecting the dots, that old guy that was singing while he was just sitting in the chair over here, and there were newspaper clippings up on the screen, that's Brother Roloff. And what Lester Roloff brought into his church, ever since then, Pastor Charles Clark has lived saying, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And if the presence of God is what you want, both in your personal life and when you come to the house of God, you've got to look at something. It doesn't have to be the summit. It can be something where you experience the overwhelming presence of God, and you have to live your life saying, I want that, I want that, I want that. That's what David said. He said, when I remember thee upon my bed, when I fall asleep at night, I'm remembering the presence of God in the sanctuary and saying, that's what I want. That's what I want my life to be. Then, stay after God all day, every day. Look at verses 7 and 8. Because thou hast been my help, therefore in the shadow of thy wings will I rejoice. My soul followeth hard after thee. Thy right hand upholdeth me. On a daily basis, whether you realize it or not, you're going after something. Something. You can go after the high score on some game. I'll be honest with you. I don't have them now, but over the years, I don't usually like a new game like, it's not even new anymore, but Mortal Kombat or Fortnite. That's not my thing. I'm more of a Pac-Man, Tetris kind of a person. And man, I've had periods in my life. I remember we were sitting in Elmer's one time with Pastor Bish, and he told me, what was that? Was that 2064? Something, a game, it was a number. 2048. And we were just having conversation. Pastor Bish, the man of God, the holy man of God. We were just chit-chatting. He said he ever played 2048. Never heard of it. But I downloaded and I became obsessed with it. But here's what happens, whether it was Pac-Man or Tetris or 2048, there comes a point where I'm in the middle of playing the game and the Spirit of God just says, hey, what are you accomplishing over there? And I delete it. And praise the Lord, it's been a while since I've been obsessed with a game. But any one of us can get upset. We can go after something that is of no consequence. Make yourself stay after God all day, every day. Then look at verses 9 and 10. But those that seek my soul to destroy it shall go into the lower parts of the earth. They shall fall by the sword. They shall be a portion for foxes. Fifth thing that you can do to maximize this is to fight the things that grieve and quench the spirit. If I was a betting man, I'd put money down that a majority of the people who went on this trip this week have had to fight something spiritually since you've gotten home. Somebody trying to bring you down. Something trying to discourage you. And when I say trying, they may not have been on purpose trying to discourage you, but the devil sure did use some person or some thought or some event to bring you down. You've got to fight the spiritual enemies. Fight the things that grieve the Spirit and fight the things that quench the Spirit. As I said, I think before I prayed, learn to value what God is doing in your church. Value it so much that you would never risk destroying it. Are there problems that come along that need to be dealt with? Absolutely. But you don't solve problems by complaining or by having a critical spirit. You solve problems by going to a person in a civil way and say, hey, we need to talk about something. Can we pray first? Let's have a word of prayer. And okay, so we just need to address this. Can we fix it? And the Bible lays out how to solve problems in the church. And it's all about prayer. It's all about humility. And it's all about following God's procedure. But fight the things that grieve and quench the spirit. And then look at this, verse 11. You say, wow, we're at verse 11. We're about done. Well, I got 6 more points after that, but 7 more points after that. But I'll breeze through them. Verse 11, but the king shall rejoice in God. Everyone that sweareth by him shall glory. But the mouth of them that speak lies shall be stopped. 6th thing you can do to maximize what the Lord has done in your heart. And by the way, you say, well, I didn't go this week. You mean it doesn't apply to me? No. First of all, many of you that weren't able to go, you live in the Spirit anyway, and so you know what I'm talking about, and you can just help us by doing the same thing to keep it rolling. But number 6, let the contrast with the world drive your hunger for God. It didn't used to be so easy to see the contrast with the world, because some of the rock musicians that were the essence of worldliness, you could look at their lives and go, well, I mean, on the surface, they're not so bad. Their music is not so bad. I'm talking, 40 years ago. But now the contrast with the world, it couldn't be clearer. And let that contrast, as David points out in verse 11, let that contrast make you stay hungry after God. To say, well, okay, I may be getting a little bit of spiritually fatigued. Hey, by the way, you do get spiritually fatigued. You get emotionally fatigued. That's why, Amy and I just came back from this week exhausted. Why? Because you're crying, and then you're laughing, then you're shouting, then it wears you out. You can get emotionally fatigued. You can get spiritually fatigued. You can get so caught up in God's truth sometimes that you just say, you know what? I need to clear my head. I need a break. But when you get to that place where you say, you know what? I can't live at this spiritual level. Take a look at contrast with the world. Look at what they got, what they're dealing with. Man, that mom. Every time I see a story like that, my first thought always is, I could not strangle a child, let alone my own child. But then I always do look at life through the eyes of the parent involved. She must have been in a desperate position. How many people out there are in such a desperate position that it would drive them out of their minds to do something so horrific? So, well, now, why are you getting all dark? Because you have to consider the dark once in a while to remind you of why you walk in the light. Don't want to go over there. I'll keep on fighting the spiritual fatigue when it comes, the emotional fatigue when it comes, because it's worth it to stay in the overwhelming presence of God. All right, so now let me give you some parting thoughts here quickly. First of all, guard your spirit. I pretty much have already said that, but guard your spirit. When you see yourself, okay, today, how could you have walked out of this morning's service without just being absolutely thrilled? But there'll be times when you'll be coming to church going, why are we doing this again? There are times when you'll be walking through the doors saying, I don't feel like getting all, hyped up, for lack of a better word. There'll be times when you'll pick up your Bible alone in the morning, when you say, man, I don't feel like going through this process again and it's hard. I mean, I've been there. I've been fighting this fight pretty much my whole life, and most days it's wonderful. Some days there's times when I get up and the first thing I do in the morning is I go to the cross. And sometimes I think about going to the cross and watching Jesus be crucified through the eyes of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, saying, I just don't feel like doing it today. You got to guard your spirit. Guard your spirit. Then come to church prepared to worship. Don't come to church. If you want to maximize the presence of God and the overwhelming presence of God, don't always just come to church counting on other people to lift you up spiritually. Yeah, hey, man, it was so easy with Brother Steve, wasn't it? He's going to get me charged. And Brother Joey leading the singing, the choir, the special music. But somebody's got to come charged. And if everybody in this room came spiritually charged every Sunday, it would expand our impact for the Lord. It would multiply what God can do here. Come to church prepared to worship. Forget yourself. Forget yourself. Instead of being self-conscious, anything that you're not used to doing, you're self-conscious when you first start doing it, right? So, forget yourself, and instead of being self-aware, be spirit-aware. Don't worry about, I don't usually sing out, so if I start singing out, people are going to be going, what's with him? What's with her? That's self-awareness. And it will keep you from opening up your heart to the Lord. So instead of focusing on anybody, can I tell you, I'm almost always the tallest person in the room, any room that I'm in, which can give you a complex. It can strengthen your pride. Tall guys have a thing, by the way. I only noticed one guy at the summit that was taller than me. And when what happens is when you pass each other, you lock eyes. And you stand up straight. And he's thinking, I'm taller than you, and I'm thinking, I'm taller than you. It's part of being tall. Some of you wouldn't know anything about that, but that was a joke. Laugh at that, please, if you would. But the other thing that it brings with it is a self-consciousness. Because you assume because you're the tallest guy in the room, everybody's looking at you. Now, I got over it years ago, praise the Lord. I don't think that way anymore. But you just assume when you walk in the room, everybody notices you because you stand out above the crowd. That's self-consciousness, self-awareness, and it doesn't do any good for you. It doesn't serve you at all. So don't focus on yourself. You know, you would think that would be pride. I'm sorry, humility, but it's not. It's pride because you're thinking about you. Forget yourself. And then I've got, all right, let me give you this word, participate. Participate in everything. Participate in everything. But let me give you 3 more now, and I'll be all done. This one is huge. Welcome. Welcome everybody. Now, I've never believed, and I've always felt like it's dangerous to have a kissy-huggy church where men and women are hugging each other. It's so dangerous, and it has ended in tragedy so many times. But I tell you what, men ought to be giving men a hug. Ladies ought to be able to give ladies a hug. But let me give you a challenge, all right? So the gentleman that visited this morning, I told you I got an email from him. One of the first things he said in his email was it was so awesome that Jose greeted me in the parking lot and showed me where to go in. That meant something to him. Every man that walks into our church, every man, I'll qualify it in a minute. Every man ought to be greeted by every man in our church. And every lady who walks into the church ought to be greeted by every lady in our church. So let me qualify that. You say, well, I don't really know who's a first-time visitor and who's not. You don't have to know. You just welcome them. Welcome the person who's been here longer than you. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody so that you're sure not to miss. Now, I'm not talking about smothering them. By the way, I'm not talking about inviting them over to your house the first time you see them. Hey, welcome to my church. Can I have your phone number? No, I'm not talking about that. That's creepy. Just welcome them. Hey, we probably have all visited churches, maybe on vacation while you're traveling, whatever, or just visiting a church, where you walk through the door and nobody talks to you. God forgive us if that's ever us. So let me challenge every man to welcome every man that comes every week, and particularly if you see a strange face, don't let it scare you. I wonder if he wants to be welcomed. He does. So go out of your way to welcome him. And same for the ladies. Welcome every lady, every teenage girl. People ought to feel at home the first time they visit. Welcome. Next word is serve. Serve. Be a servant. I'm talking about even in the littlest things. You see a piece of paper on the floor, a piece of trash, pick it up. Throw it away. Serve. What can I do to help you? Monica testified about this morning, the spirit of hospitality that we all experienced this week. Let me remind you that the majority of those people were just church members, not paid staff members, church members serving. Then the last word is something that I hope we pick up, and that is the word give. Give. Every time a pastor talks about giving, right away you think he's trying to raise money. And I'm going to tell you, that's very true in the northeastern United States compared to if you've ever lived anywhere else and gone to church. people are practically throwing their money at God, and it's not because they have a lot of it. It's because they just want to invest in God's work. They want to help God's people. The spirit of giving. And I'm just saying, we have a great spirit of giving here. I'm not beating you up, but I am telling you from having traveled every region of the country except the Northwest. I've never been there. And being in churches, hundreds of churches over the years, the spirit of giving in this part of the country is nowhere near what it is among God's people in other places. I'm not trying to shame you. I'm just telling you how that is. But if you want to be exceptional, and by the way, if you want God to pour out his blessings, study the Bible and see if it's not so that when we give, he showers his blessings upon us in many ways. I'm not talking about a sowing and reaping money thing like, some guy on TV will talk about planting the seed. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you want your life to be abundantly blessed, then be an abundant blessing to others. I've given you a bunch of things. I'm not going to repeat them for sake of time. I hope some of it you caught. And these are the ways that we can maximize the work that God has done this week, the work that God did today, and pray that God continues to do this work. Now, along the lines of giving, I would like to do this. I would like to be a blessing to Solid Rock. And so I didn't say it this morning, and I'm just going to be totally transparent with you. The reason I don't say these things in the morning before we take the offering is because we cannot afford to give our tithe to other projects. I don't think it's scriptural. The Bible says bring your tithes into the storehouse. I believe your tithe goes to the church where you attend. And so I don't say anything before if I'm going to do a special offering, because I just don't want us to give into that temptation and say, oh yeah, I want to bless Solid Rock, so let me give my tithe. That's messing up the works. But tonight, I would love for us, I'll just throw out a number. I would love to us to be able to send a check for $1,000 to Solid Rock Baptist Church. The people sacrifice beyond anything we can even comprehend. And I would like to do you realize if we're able to send them, for example, $1,000, we have just barely paid back what they invested in your pastor and his wife this week, because what they did to be a blessing to us was just so phenomenal, but it costs money. And I would like to help them. I'm sure they've got a ton of bills. I would like to help them. If you can do something special, anything that comes in this offering, unless it is in a tithing envelope, if it's anything undesignated, we'll go to Solid Rock towards being a blessing, thanking them for a wonderful week. They don't ask us to do this. They would discourage us from doing this. But I want us to give and to be a blessing to them, cheerful giving out of a heart of love for the Lord. So let's have the men come tonight, and we'll take up everything, as I said, everything undesignated in this offering will go to Solid Rock Baptist Church. As we do, let me remind you again, please, first of all, there'll be no soul winning this Wednesday night. And secondly, that next week is going to be a little bit of a crazy Sunday. And I appreciate your help with this.